Welcome back. So in this session, this could be 5th grade, even 6th grade activity. It's a toy, and many of you have seen these toys before. Many haven't. Many have tried them. Many have failed. But if you can get it on the first one, that means that you've been practicing. But it does take some practice to get good at it, and the kids love to play with these. 5th grade is a good time because they still have that early childhood behind them just recently, and they do like to play still. So we're going to start with wood that's basically already been prepared. This is about 4.5 or 45 millimeters by 45 millimeters, or 4.5 centimeters, or 1.75 inches by 1.75 inches. And the length of it, this one here that we're using, is about 23 centimeters long, or in inches, we're talking about 9 inches long. Okay, that's good size. Okay, now you can see that this one came out of one just a little bit bigger. And of course, we have other wood that's smaller. So depending on what size wood you're using will determine the size of the hole that you need to drill. Okay, now if you're lucky enough to have a well-stocked woodworking shop, you'll have a drill press. And you can go ahead and prepare all of the projects for your kids with the drill press so that they don't have to deal with this next part that I'm going to show you. But if you don't mind them doing their own drilling, and if you can assemble the proper tools for it, then they can do this here at the table with hand tools. So now the next thing I need to do is to determine where the center of this, where we're going to drill this hole. And that does matter quite a bit. And if your hole is too big, then the sides of this is going to be very, very thin, and it's going to be a dangerous task to try to get it all carved out round. You'll see a little bit later what I mean by that. And the tool that I'm going to use today to demonstrate this is a 1.5 inch auger bit. Okay, and I have it attached to the bracing bit, and I know where the center of this is, so I'm just going to simply start it here. This may take a little time, and of course, if you're using a real soft wood like this linden wood is, what will happen is the screw will not really have anything to grab hold of, and so you're going to have to push and use pressure to get it down. Okay, if you're using a harder wood, like maybe this is poplar, then the screw has got enough, the wood's got enough strength for the screw to pull itself into the wood, which will make the job much easier. Now, if you use a smaller bit, it's got to be the kind of bit that's that's made to use with a brace and a bit. Otherwise, it'll strip it out. All right, so if you have enough of these braces and bits to go around for your whole class, to take turns using it, that might take a bit of time if you've only got a few tools and a lot of kids. So that's why it might be a good idea for the woodworking teacher to go ahead and pre-drill these holes out for the kids, because that does take a lot of time. However, just so happens that I have one prepared already. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to determine how deep that hole is. So I'm going to use my finger as a little gauge, and it's about that deep. Now, that means that I want to be about half again further along so that I have enough room to make a curve without getting into the hole or cutting into the hole. So in this case, it's going to be about 5 centimeters long, where we're going to start cutting in. So you can use a tool to mark it. That's where we're going to cut in for the neck. And I have this tool, which I'm going to demonstrate in a few minutes. This is called a draw knife, and this will make the work go much faster than just using the hand knife. But in the beginning, I'm going to start with this hand knife, and I'm just going to put one little cut on each corner. Just slide it through like that. And I'm pushing down. And get each one of those corners done. And then you can start carving away at those. So they do this in each corner. Little by little, they're going to get deeper and deeper until this goes all the way through and becomes a whole neck. As the child gets more and more confident using this knife, that's when it gets more and more dangerous. So you have to constantly remind them about the safety and not to get overconfident. But you see, I'm just working in this one little area here. I'm not working along the whole length of it yet, because I really want to establish where that neck is going to be before I do anything else. Now I'm showing you the technique that I find is the easiest, that makes it really simple for the kids to make. Now, you may want to try different techniques yourself before you teach this course to anyone and see what works best for you. This is what works best for me, is to slowly work on this neck. Well, the very first thing, of course, is to pre-drill the holes, but then the very next thing is to work on this neck. Okay. Okay, once we get a pretty good neck established there, then we can start working our way back down these corners, down the handle further. But I find that if you get it nice and deep at the very beginning, at the beginning stage, then when you're doing this activity here on this corner, if you find that your grain is kind of going very parallel with what your knife is doing, it's going to catch and it's going to rip and tear, and it's not going to be a happy experience. A lot of times when that happens, you have to turn the wood the other way and go in the right direction of the grain. But we're not going to do that yet, because I found that if you go quite a bit deeper, even if the grain is going against you, you're coming down at such an angle that it's not going to interfere. When the knife is parallel with that grain, you're going to have a problem. At this point, you want to start working down the handle further. And as long as the wood's cooperating with you, you can just keep on going until you have nothing else to hold on to. And you want to turn it around and go the opposite direction. This is where you might want to remind the child not to get too close to their hand with this knife, using this lever and fulcrum technique. Okay, another way is to use it like this, like a saw. Okay. And now I'm going to show you another technique. Okay. Now, of course, if the child is afraid of the knife, and there are a lot of kids that may have trimmed their finger a little bit with the knife, and they may not want to use the knife too much, so they'll give an opportunity to use the rasp. Now, the rasp is going to take a lot longer, but a lot of kids like using the rasp. They think it's more effective than a knife because it doesn't take quite as much force to get the rasp to operate through the wood. But then you'll have some kids that won't even push on it and just rub like that, and it'll take them the rest of their life to finish one of these projects. So you got to make sure that they engage their will, even if they're using the rasp. This next technique I'm going to show is something you have to be really careful that you don't squeeze. You need to put your project in a vise or in a clamp, and you need to make sure that you don't squeeze it so hard that you end up crushing this hole here and cracking your whole wood. And I'm going to show you how to use a knife called a draw knife. Got a really sharp blade on it, but now you've got two handles to pull on, and you can slowly shave off those corners like this. And you see how it makes easy work of it and makes pretty cool little spiral patterns out of the shavings. As you can see, this is kind of an art form, just learning how to use this draw knife, the technique properly, but they catch on pretty quick. They realize that if it doesn't make these curly-Q kind of shavings, that they're really fighting against themselves, and they learn that pretty fast. Now you notice the draw knife doesn't go all the way up to the neck, so that's where you're going to definitely have to take it out and do that part by hand. Okay, so you can see that we're about quarter around there. And we're going to need to do that to each of the corners. Work our way down. So the neck is going to keep getting thinner and thinner until it is about the size of the hole. So again, I'm going to go a little bit tiny bit deeper here. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the spoke shave to make the rest of the handle thinner. And then I'm going to use the rasp. But slowly we're going to get this bottom piece. And you can keep looking and see how much closer you're getting to the size of the hole. Now, we can test this using this piece. And there it is. It goes in. Just barely. But we know that this is about the right size we want to be at. Okay, so we don't have to do any more on the end. Now we just work our way up the handle. But you want to always keep checking to make sure that your size is not too big. So that goes all the way in. So we know that that's good. Now we want to make this handle at least that same size. Maybe even smaller. So now we're about ready to start cutting this ball. Want to make sure that it's about the same diameter all the way around, and you do that by using your own finger as a gauge. If you want to measure it, if you're one of the kind of people who wants to measure everything, I'm measuring 3, so you can measure down 3, make a mark, and there you go. You're ready to go. The next step is we're going to cut a straight line into it like this. Get all the way around it a couple times. Every time you do it, it gets a little deeper, which is even better. So now you're going to start carving this direction into where that straight line that you just cut with. And you go all the way around the whole handle here. And you're just going to chip away a little bit of that wood to begin with, and then you're going to come back and trim it all off again. Before we even work on the ball, we're going to work on the handle. Okay, now I'm going to start carving a little bit of an angle like this on the ball side. And you see I'm pushing. I'm not pushing this way, I'm pushing this way. Very slightly. And often the children will think you have to push this way, and if they do that, and there's not a little notch in here yet, the knife could easily slide this way and cut themselves. So that's why I always put this notch in here first before we start working on the ball itself. Helps protect their hands. Encourage them to take their time on this particular process because it is dangerous and you want it to be an accurate shaped ball. I've seen some balls that people have made that are just so perfect, look like a machine made them. I carved this one. This is a little bit pumpkin shaped, but it seems working pretty good. Now, on the other side of the ball, on the end of it, you can start using the knife in this fashion like this to start getting the edge of that shaft, that cylinder, kind of beginning to form that ball shape. You can see it coming together. You could use a rasp. Oh, it's getting there. As you see, you can use a rasp here too. Okay, I'm going to use the fine side of the rasp now. Now you could use this technique of using this knife, going back and forth like this until you get all the way through it. Or you can use another technique. Now this is a little bit more dangerous, but it is faster. It's not dangerous on your hands, but it's easy to mess this up. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the ball off, but I'm not going to cut it like this because that'll create a flat spot. I'm going to be holding the saw like this. So if you watch carefully, you'll see what I'm doing. So I've got it slightly at an angle. And then I'm going to flip it over and do the next side. It's handy to have that square on the end of it still for this purpose. Okay, there's the ball. Okay, again, it's a little bit pumpkin shaped, but we can work on that with a rasp. And use the rasp to round it off a little bit. And let's see, will it fit? Oh yeah, it barely fits. Perfect. Look at that. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and take the rasp and clean this up just a little bit. It doesn't need a whole lot. And then the sandpaper, of course, you can spend as much time with the sandpaper as you like to get that ball nice and smooth. I'm going to show you the next step here real quick. With the ball is to put a hole in it for your string to attach. These are little hand chucks. And this is the chuck key. And it's not power, it's not electric. And you just simply use your own hand to run it through your material. Try to make it go up and down straight. And you'll feel it get through to the end. And you want to go ahead and turn it a few times and pull it out. Go from the other side. The string that I have here is actually nylon. And you see what happens to the end of the nylon string. Even if you cut it and have a nice clean cut, it's still a little frayed. And it's going to be very difficult to get through that hole when it's frayed. To melt the end of it so it doesn't fray on you, well, it does barely. If you do this too long, it'll melt and make a big glob. And let's see if it's going to fit in that hole. That's the big question. Yes, it does. So then what I do is I use the drill bit itself to push it the rest of the way through. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It may take a couple of attempts. And there it comes. There it is. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the string and pull the ball off of the drill bit. Okay, now in the process of doing that, it tore up the nylon a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that roughed up part off. Okay, and I'm going to burn the end of this again. Now this time I'm going to go ahead and let a nice little ball of plastic form there. And that ball of plastic is going to keep it from pulling through the rest of the hole. There we go. Okay, just like this. Okay, and then I know that plastic is still red hot. I mean, it's hot. It'll burn you if you touch it. So it's going to kind of push it down. And there the ball's nicely attached. So the next step, of course, is to go ahead and start working on the cup. Now that, I've seen all kinds of like little designs carved into these cups. You see you've only got about this much room on the side, but that's enough to carve a little design in there if you'd like. I have another one that I've got about to the same process right here. And you can see what I've done is I've started rounding off the corners and rounding off the edges. So I'll go ahead and see if this ball will work in there, and it does. Okay, good. And you'll notice that this handle on this one's a bit thicker than the handle on this. Well, this is not thin enough. It needs to be at least this thin. And then you notice how the neck actually kind of tapers in and is even smaller than the rest of the handle. Well, that's to keep the string from falling off once you get the string attached. But the technique for getting it to this point is very simple. Use a rasp, or you can use a knife. Okay, the knife can be done just like we've done it before. The rasp can be done just like we used the rasp before. And so now, this one's further along. Even though the handle's too thick, I'm going to go ahead and finish up this cup-shaped one here. Again, you got to be careful not to make these sides too thin. So you got to keep looking at it. That's the key. You got to keep looking. Now you can sand this thing forever. Okay, you can sand it starting with the 80 grit sandpaper, which is the roughest one. Okay, and the more you sand, the thinner the handle's going to get, thinner everything's going to get. So if you've gotten quite thinner on this lip here, you need to be very careful about sanding it. You want to sand the inside of the cup too. And I found that if you make the edge here thin, right at the very lip of it, that the ball goes in easier. It doesn't bounce out so easy. So we'll see what happens here. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to make the rope about this long. So I'm going to wrap it around once or twice. A simple knot is all you need. And then tie it again. Cut off your excess. And then go ahead and melt that plastic so it doesn't fray up on you. And here we go. Let's find out if this thing's going to work. Hey, look at that. First time. The longer the string is, the more difficult it is to actually work this toy. So you might want to make the string a little bit smaller for the little children to be able to be successful with. So that's it. Well, I hope you enjoy watching that little video. These are a lot of fun to make. I'll definitely see you on our next video. Bye-bye.